Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MKR Scientific Governance and Risk Meeting, number 137, taking place on Thursday, April 15th at 1700 UTC. My name is Long for Wisdom. I'm the Governance Facilitator at MakerDAO. I run these meetings. As usual, we've got our agenda to get through. We've got some sort of the usual suspects for their weekly updates. We've got some kind of MIPs stuff to cover. And then we're going to have a discussion a little bit later about the MKR threshold in the ESM. So yeah, usual kind of preamble. If you have comments, if you want to ask questions, please do interrupt. We're generally pretty happy to have people get involved. If we need to move on the conversation because of time, I can't do that, but please don't let that stop you. All right. So we'll start off with governance, as we want to do. So last week we had a bit of a discussion about passing executives. Things were looking a little bit slow last week. Thankfully, after that call, we sort of got a more heavier, or like a heavier participation from some larger MKR holders, which was good to see. So we managed to pass both last week's and the week before's executive. So that included core unit budget distributions for April. It included some increases to some of the debt ceilings. And then last week we had new silver drop go in to the protocol. Not quite live yet, but will be soon, which is, I guess, technically the second real-world asset, but the first active one, I guess you could say. Which is awesome to see movement on that front. So this week, I believe the plan is to have liquidations 2.0 in the executive. Chris, feel free to interrupt if I'm wrong. I think we're going to focus on just having that because it's quite a large change. So we'll kind of turn that on and turn it on for Link specifically, as well as like kind of authorizing all the liquidations 2.0 contracts. Polls-wise this week, we had a set of inclusion polls as part of the monthly governance cycle. All of those passed, I believe. And we'll have a MIPS update later as well. We also had a signal based on the petition letter to A16Z pushed by IMEO, which also passed. The 4,000 MKR in favor and almost none against. We did have 8,000 MKR abstaining, which is a little interesting. I'm guessing people are a little bit unsure of kind of voting on this sort of thing. Yeah, let's see what else. So we also passed the parameter changes proposal. The poll for that succeeded. I think the 60,000 MKR or so in favor. So we'll actually probably push this back by 1 week because of liquidations 2.0. So kind of just mentioned. So this will probably go into the executive at the end of next week rather than this week. All right. So I think that covers our kind of voting and polling updates. In terms of GovAlpha, which is the governance core units led by me, we've kind of been working on a few things last week. As some of you may have seen, we posted a kind of delegation plan to the forum, which kind of introduces delegation and kind of shares some the path we're going to take forwards. I imagine a lot of you have seen it, but if not, I'll drop a link in the chat. This is also kind of an open call for people who are interested in potentially being delegates. So if if you feel that is you, please reach out to me either privately or publicly. We've also been continuing with onboarding in GovAlpha in the form of Pros and Eli. We've got an initiative to kind of inventory the current MIPs we've got, kind of have a look and make sure, or to kind of find any that are maybe now obsolete given some of the new changes, sort of tidying up like wording and stuff. That's ongoing. I did some minor category changes in the forum to make signal requests a little bit nicer. Now, if you access the signal request category, you'll only see the active signal requests instead of like a huge list of everything ever. MIPS portal work continues. DSpot are continuing to do awesome work on that. And then otherwise this week I've mostly been kind of dealing with internal governance alpha processes, like getting people paid, this sort of thing. Not terribly interesting, but obviously important to those involved. Right. Yeah, that covers Go Alpha, so maybe we can move on to Forum at a glance. I believe this is Peyton today.
Yep, my week. Grabbing the link here in case you wanted to follow along. As Tim pointed out in our pre-discussion, I couldn't help myself, and one of the points for this week is MKR sitting at an all-time high, so everybody's happy there. Also of note is that ETH continues to be utilized, so we're up to over 1.75 billion in DAI drawn from there, and we're pretty close to passing 100 billion in annualized stability fees just from ETH. Other great news is the PEG is looking outstanding, sitting right at $8 flat, according to DAI Decipher. So that was pretty exciting this morning. If you've been on the forum, there are a couple announcements, things you might want to check out, maybe you haven't seen. Number one is announcing MakerDAO's community blog. I know Tim made the post and he was working with a bunch of other really great people in terms of giving us a space where you can actually contribute, write articles, help explain things that are happening in the Maker ecosystem. So do check out that post if you're interested in contributing. Along the real world assets lines, Matt did post his kind of document roadmap for all that Success is doing, and looking really good there. Hoping we get some more good updates coming shortly. For active discussions you might want to engage with, we do have the staking rewards discussion. Sam brought that to us, kind of referencing the governance/staking rewards MIP and bringing some charts over in terms of like how much yield would actually be going to MKR token holders. So that's pretty interesting. We also have a series of questions about strategy from Seth, which is a cool post talking about DAI growth and really kind of where the Maker protocol goes from here. And finally, on the discussion front, there's a thread with an informal poll about increasing the source cred payouts. So if you have opinions on that, do be sure to leave them. Currently, there's only one active signal request, and that is for lowering the liquidation ratio for the DAI USDC UniV2 vault. And got some really good points there by Monet Supply, put a lot of time kind of into explaining the thought behind that, but you can go ahead and leave your opinion and vote to send this on chain if that's something you like. And that pretty much does it for me.
Great, thanks, Peyton. All right, if no one has any questions regarding governance for the time being, we can move on.
Yeah, smart contracts next. So,
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody, Chris on the smart contracts team. I'm a little tired. I don't know if anyone else will mention it, but we all got woken up with a bunch of alerts. I know the Coinbase IPO happened yesterday, but also the Berlin hard fork happened. And there was a bug in the Open Ethereum clients that caused them all to have a consensus error on, I forget exactly which block ID. So all the Open Ethereum nodes across Ethereum froze in the wee hours of the morning, at least my time. And so we've all been kind of making sure and working around that, making sure that things are okay and working around that problem. I'll say, and maybe Oracle's is the most critical infrastructure, but this is a well planned out failure case at the foundation, and we should continue to take care around this issue in the DAO. But we have plenty of like node redundancy, so we run like FN parity, and so we were able to flip anything that was on parity over. But if anyone wants to mention anything else about the outage, feel free. So, I'll mention that the fix is out. I think it's being compiled in, and parity nodes should start to come back online. So you should see that across the ecosystem. A lot of block explorers and everything were down. So I'm sure most people eventually this morning realized that there was a pretty big problem. Let's see. yeah, are there any serious consequences? I don't think there are any serious consequences. I think there obviously could be if your infrastructure is dependent on just the on just like parity nodes, because then you may have keepers running and all of those go offline. You may have like UIs that people can't like access in a critical moment. If we had had like some major market moves during this, I still think the foundation would have been okay, but I don't know. Probably one of the biggest ones is that most of the exchanges had to stop doing withdrawals, and so that's a major problem. So if the market started moving a lot, we would only have the sort of liquidity that was available on the chain to deal with it. People wouldn't be able to move from liquidity from exchanges onto the chain and whatnot. So. But Ethereum's redundant and works around it. So I'll let you guys have that discussion in the sidebar. I'm going to move on to details about MIP22. Obviously, MIP22 spell went into mainnet and passed. So we're waiting for that to execute, I think, tomorrow. We also had to cycle back and deal with some issues from that in Kovan. So there's, we had changed the token name, and so we updated that in Kovan. I posted those updates in the collateral onboarding updates channel, so that everything is all patched up in Kovan so that Kovan matches mainnet. Then with regards to MIP45, which is liquidations 2.0, we also it's been in Kovan, but the addresses are in the collateral onboarding updates channel. We are working on the DSS deploy scripts and just sort of finalizing that. And also we've been working with lots of different teams and keepers and other services to make sure that liquidations 2.0 will work. We've updated the HackerOne bug bounty program to reflect the new contracts. So happy bug hunting. If you want to get out there, do it now. It's better that we find these things now than later. And we are probably momentarily, well, let's say sometime today, likely to have an update to the MIP45 that'll include all the audit links. I think you can go to security.makerdao.com right now, and you should be able to get the audit reports. One of them is missing, but we'll get that report out. It's not missing because we don't want to show it. It's missing, for other can we publish this reasons. And then also we're prepping for Wi-Fi next week. So now we've got this tight cadence that's going to start happening where we're going to have to go to Kovan with the sort of next week's bundle while we're going to mainnet with the prior one, and that's probably going to persist for about another 4 to 5 weeks. So. And then we've also, just as sort of miscellaneous items, we've got some review of the Sushi Join adapter happening. ABDK, who's auditing it, came back with a sort of initial set of responses. And so we're also looking at those and hoping to get to that so that we can send back any responses to that next week. And there's also the Omega Poker that is in review. And under development is a delegate voting contract, which Long for Wisdom kind of alluded to earlier. So that's all for smart contracts. That's all I had. If anyone else has anything else, please mention it. And I did say Omega Poker.
So the upgrade to the Mega Poker.
It's the upgrade to the Mega Poker. But the best part of the job is naming things. So
yeah, I agree. All right, let's move on to oracles if there's any questions.
Cool. Yeah, I guess just to follow up on what Mooney was saying, right? Last night we had the Berlin hard fork, and we had the Open Ethereum clients have an issue. I just remember quickly checking. I woke up and quickly checked. Are we good? And we were fine. We've kind of prepared for this in advance because of issues that we've had in the past where one of the clients would be affected during a fork, or all of the you know, the instance that you're running, right, goes down or something. So we've pretty heavily diversified what nodes we use. So, you know, we use a combination for the Oracle relayers. We use like a combination of Geth, Parity, Infura, and it would probably be good to get one up running on Alchemy as well. Did not see any hiccup in Oracle service, so everything working as expected. On the DeFi Saver front, right, we had voted them in to be a light feed. They're a little bit, they're dealing with some stuff on their end right now. So they haven't set up their light feed yet. So I don't think we add their key to this week's executive vote. Yeah, Andrew, they're definitely overwhelmed. But hopefully we can get them set up for next week and include them in next week's executive vote. And I think that's it from my end. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Nick. I think that brings us to risk. Pramesh, you have an update for us?
Yeah. So we released liquidation parameters for Wi-Fi Vault today, which is supposed to have new liquidation system implemented right after Link. So Link this week and then Wi-Fi next week. And then next week, we're proposing ETH and Wrap Bitcoin liquidation parameters that will likely be slightly different, mostly because liquidation ratios are lower. So we might want to settle these auctions just a bit earlier. So instead of 40 minutes expected auction duration, we might propose only a bit shorter duration, specifically for vault types such as ETH-B, where risks of loss at maker are a bit higher. Mark also refreshed evaluation for PackG, proposed parameters that are mostly identical to those that we recommended last year, but we're still waiting for PackG team to answer some of the concerns that were brought up on the forum. So we're still waiting on their feedback after we contact them on this matter in the past few days. Monet Supply also made a post that was mentioned actually earlier from our side regarding raising the MKR threshold for emergency shutdown. I believe we're going to talk about this later, so I'll leave that discussion to be held later. Yeah, and other than that, mostly focused on our risk web app, which, as I already mentioned on one of the previous calls, we plan to have all risk recommendations, so risk premiums, debt ceilings, value at risk calculations, all in one place on a web app. So community members or future analysts can have a look how we calculate certain things. But it also helps us automate all these calculations because amount of assets in Maker portfolio is growing and probably will grow soon. Once liquidations are finished, we will probably start onboarding more aggressively again additional assets. So I think that's all from my side.
Sweet. Thank you very much.
Can I just add something, Pramesh? Maybe we can have an open hours, discuss the time. Maybe we'll do a forum, but discuss the liquidation times for those vaults, because that's what the problem we had before. I know we worked towards it, but maybe we can have an open hour so everybody can discuss it before we go live on the big ETH vault. I don't mind
Sure.
once. Yeah.
Sure, happy to do
No,
this. We
Yeah,
also need to have this discussion about incentivizing kicks. We also need to solve this issue.
Sure. So maybe if you send me, I think you have my email, and then maybe we'll just put a call out to the community, whoever wants to be on it, and go through it.
Okay, good.
All right, thanks.
A question from me. You talked about the expected auction duration, I believe. Do you mean by that the moment the price curve hits the ESM price?
No, that's the moment the price curve hits the market price. And this depends, right? If market price is flat from the time OSM price fit we got, it's 40 minutes on average. But if the price rebounds, it's earlier. If the price crashes additionally, it's later. So 40 minutes is on average, they should take so much time.
So you run different simulations and then you took the average, is that it?
No, pretty much we did that as well, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. 40 minutes sounds short, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we had this discussion. So Gauntlet recommended 20 minutes. We thought 40 minutes, it's better. It was discussed a couple of times between our teams, smart contracts. Was kind of agreed it's okay.
But maybe it's good to notice that after that point is hit, the curve becomes flatter and flatter, right? So it's not because you hit the market price at 40 minutes that another 40 minutes you're at 0 or something. The price curve is much flatter than that.
Yeah, right. It's dropping much slower after 40 minutes, but it's still dropping, right? And then once it reaches, not sure what's the cusp we set. So the limit, I think it was 40% on OSM times 1.3. I think once it reaches about 50%, then the auction resets.
Yeah, I think for people's intuition, might be good to know like at what intervals it hits, like 80%, 70%, and so on. So that might be interesting to document a bit.
Yeah, we can do that. Sure, good point.
All right, thanks everyone. That brings us to reward finance with the patches.
Yeah, sure. So first on the more finance side, I would say AES released a framework for evaluating the MKR price. Obviously, some people are reading it because now the MKR price is rising, still under the fair value of the model. So still a good time to buy, but not investment advice. We also have a new cool finance website thanks to the operational support team that track every main items that we have on the finance side, all the financial presentations and stuff like that. The big news from this week is obviously the new silver onboarding that was done on Monday and validated, I think, the next day, and will be executed tomorrow. That was great, and we expect to have the first draw on the loan next week. It's not 100% sure because there was a lot of investor in this pool as well lately, so maybe it will take a bit more time. And there is a call tomorrow to discuss that more in details, focus on the reward finance team. Excellent run. So if you have more questions on this collateral, feel free to join and we can discuss that. Or any other subject you might want to ask about the reward finance team. And lastly, on the other collaterals, more specifically on the scheduling. So we have onboarded right now 2 collaterals, success being in the middle of the onboarding. And we have discussed with the smart contract team to onboard 1 collateral per month, at least starting from June. So currently we have a pipeline of almost, I would say, 10 collaterals to onboard. So that will fill the pipeline until the end of the year. So that might lead to prioritizing or even pruning the pipeline. And I'm not sure how to do it currently, so I have still to figure out what should be done. So if you have some thought about how you want real-world asset to be onboarded in the next few months, that could be obviously helpful. And if you have some ideas about how to prioritize, because there is many paths we can take from here. One would be to say that we should onboard the smallest one,
because obviously we are still in the experiment phase. So onboarding the smallest one is less risky, because even if there is a problem, it's not that a big problem, but obviously it doesn't move the needle, and we have still a lot of USDC to use. So you can also decide that some collaterals are better. For instance, SolarX project to use 100 million of DAI. So maybe that's more interesting, and since solar farming in the New York State, so maybe less risky than using some trade finance companies. But at the same time, trade finance companies can help us to reach new customers in Asia. So there is always a trade-off, and it's not clear what should be decided here. And I think at some point the community should participate in the discussion and give feedback in one way or another. And that's about it for me. If you have some questions or some feedbacks, please feel free.
Thank you, Seb. Yeah, regarding like the kind of, I guess, choosing direction for that, it feels like, so for me personally, it feels like quite a complex subject. I'm sure there's others that feel similarly. Like if you're kind of looking for direction, maybe it's worth putting together like some, you know, like some possible options. Like you mentioned a couple of them there, right? But maybe sort of documenting those in more detail and kind of sort of going into like the pros and cons and stuff.
Yeah, I think the first step will be, I will make a summary as a forum post to trigger a discussion, so we can have a more thought discussion about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, that brings us to operational support, which I guess still exists kind of at the moment.
Kind of exist. We call it operational something, but yes. So quick update from our side. We're trying to give more visibility to different core units. So we're launching tomorrow focus on real world finance. So this is a space where existing core units can hopefully describe in more detail and take questions from the community on what they're doing. So happy to make one with you, Primoz, if you guys feel that it's needed, as Joe was mentioning, or with you, Long, and your team. Yeah, going to the MIPs, we had the declaration of intent EuroDAI, so the Know Your MIP number 6 last Friday was quite cool with Seb and Ultra Shupi. And yesterday we had another call with the real world finance token, I guess to call it, Solid Block. And 2 weeks from now, we'll have MCO2, which is to neutralize carbon emissions. Moving on to, well, Seb already mentioned it, but tomorrow we'll have this this call at 3 p.m. UTC. And next week we will have, going back to the core units, we'll have on Monday, David and governance communications core unit. And on Wednesday, we will have the sustainable ecosystem scaling. So Wouter and myself are going to be showing or trying to describe what's coming and why we're so excited about it. Then on interesting topics of conversations, well, Amy posted the representative of the working groups. So maker people at a glance, to give an idea for people that are less connected. And then regarding the maker and compensation working group, I think it was Long that posted the selected representatives. So hopefully we will be moving forward with this relatively soon. So hopefully I'm not forgetting anything. Let me know if there are any questions.
Yeah, I'll just add that I forgot to mention the maker compensation thing earlier. Yeah, it all should. I'm hoping to have the first meeting either next week or the week after. We're spending a little bit of time trying to find someone to fill the third-party slot, but we're not going to like wait too long if we can't manage to find anyone. So we're getting started soon. All right, that brings us to community development. Anna, do you have an update for us this week?
Hey everyone. Yeah, I have a few updates that I just wanted to share. In community development over the last several months, one of our biggest focus has been wrapping up a lot of projects and navigating this transition from community development as a department bootstrapped by the foundation to people and projects transferring over to the DAO. And I wanted to spotlight one specific project today. So I can just share my screen really quickly.
Yeah, one sec. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, this is, yeah, can everyone see my screen? I think it's sharing.
Yep.
So I just wanted to share this. This is a design archive. One of the contributors in community development, Shay, has been working, who's worked on the community development portal and a lot of the illustrations there, has created this project called the Branded Assets, which takes us inspiration from foundation branding, but made it our own that we can use for community. And essentially what she delivered is this beautiful document where anyone can go and create graphics that you can use for any projects. There's also a PowerPoint presentation, I believe down here on the side. But anyone in the community can go in. There's instructions here how you can create graphics for anything that you're creating. There's ways to create, create slides, presentations. All the instructions are in this document here, and I'll share the links afterwards. As well as like the different design logic behind it and how she came up with this. And then the other project that I wanted to share and kind of spotlight this week is, Peyton already mentioned it, but we launched community development portal launched a new feature called the Maker Community Blog. And essentially anyone can contribute to this. There's also a archive issue that Tim posted on GitHub that has instructions for how anyone can add, essentially put up a PR and add a blog post to this site. And I'll share the links to this as well. And that's it for me for this week.
Great, thanks, Anna. Do you have, I guess, just to get my respect, like we're on the blog, do you have anyone, I guess, who's kind of sort of talked about any blog posts they'd like to make or planning to make or anything?
Yeah, so currently we posted a lot of the stories that we've written in the past. Like there's several posts about how community development portal came to be, and there's I currently post the monthly governance review on there, as well as the content production unit is planning to kind of own and use this as a tool to publish content that they're going to be working on once that core unit is ratified. And if anyone wants to contribute, they can reach out to Seth or Tim as well in the forum to learn more about how someone can contribute.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Anna? Okay, let's move on. So that brings us to MIPs. David, are you giving us a MIPs update this week?
Yes, I am. Can you please give me a screen share?
Should be good.
Sweet. All right, that should be on your screens now. So yeah, welcome to the weekly MIPS update. I'm David Utrobin, lots of you know me. Anyway, this week's update's pretty simple. The inclusion polls just closed, and as Long mentioned earlier in the call, everything passed. It's a total of 16 proposals. Yeah, it's exciting. Next up is the bundled governance poll that's happening this coming Monday. And lastly, we've been doing a lot of cleanup in the MIPS repo these past couple of weeks. So huge shout out to Pablo, also known as Blimpa. He has been fixing formatting inconsistencies. He has preemptively added tags to the preamble section for MIPS. He's added sentence descriptions where they were missing, and overall, he's been doing a great job just cleaning up that repo that we all rely on for the MIPS. Here's just a visual of April. So this is the week we're in. We're doing inclusion polls. And so, yeah, Monday is the bundled governance poll. And lastly, if you're unfamiliar with the governance cycle, there is a week 4 bundled MIPS executive vote to officially ratify all the MIPS and sub-proposals. So as for the MIPS that were actually submitted, it was mostly core units. So we have 4 fresh core units going through the cycle this month: content production, growth, protocol engineering, and the swag shop. Highly recommend you guys check out their mandates. All 4 of these teams are doing really interesting stuff. As for amendments, there's a handful of them. So starting from the top, there's a MIP4 amendment that basically allows for more flexibility to do an actual amendment to a new MIP. So any MIP that's 3 months or younger can use the weekly governance cycle instead of being required to use the monthly governance cycle. And same thing for removals. And also, amendments and removals can be submitted as one sub-proposal if they're related. For the MIP9 amendments, we're introducing a second green light poll date on the first Monday of each month. That's also a pretty cool addition. And then as for the MIP0 amendments, we added component 14, which talks a little bit about the process behind MIP set management. So as you know, there's a lot of interconnected MIPs, and MIP sets just gives us a better ability to organize and to really understand the dependencies of certain MIPs and which ones are connected and whatnot. And then lastly, we had a declaration of intent in the cycle this month. It's to support analysis of a EuroPeg die. So it's not affirming that we're going to just launch one. It's just saying that MKR holders, if they're voting for this, are interested in a team proposing themselves that would actually do the research and propose an action plan to get into this idea. EuroPeg die has been in the conversation for a long time. In fact, a lot of synthetic non-US dollar tied synthetic currencies coming out of Maker have always been part of the conversation, and the Euro one is looking like the first one to be seriously researched. That's about it for what has been submitted. As for new MIPs that we saw this month, we saw 3 from what I could tell. If I missed any, just reach out to me. I'll make sure to add them in the MIPs update. But yeah, we saw MIP 51, which was submitted by GovAlpha. It was a proposal for updating the monthly cycle. Definitely check that out. It's an RFC now. MIP 50 was also submitted. This is a technical MIP called Direct Deposit Module. Thank you, Sam, for submitting that as well. It's an interface that manages DAI liquidity and rates on third-party lending protocols like Aave. And then lastly, yeah, we saw the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit MIP set be submitted this month. So really exciting. And definitely, if you are on the forums, go participate, opt in the source cred, and share your feedback and make this stuff better. And yeah, and lastly, vote. Thank you all, and that's my update. And also, I will post the actual MIPS update in the chat, as well as a link to the MIPS portal and also the MIPS tracker. So there's a few different resources you could use if you're looking for to stay up to date on MIPS on a given moment in the day. So yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, David. Yeah, looking forward to seeing some of those core units get through. It's going to be good. All right, I guess I will quickly do the procedural part that I'm supposed to do. Just confirming, as David said, that all the MIPS inclusion poll MIPS proposals that had inclusion polls last week, they all passed, and they will continue until next week's monthly governance bundle poll. All right. So I believe that brings us to the end of our posted agenda. So everyone should kind of feel free to ask questions, interrupt more than usual, as we're now in the kind of discussion part of the call. One thing we did kind of want to discuss in a little bit more, detail was the emergency shutdown module MKR threshold. So for those who don't know what this is the amount of MKR that's required to trigger emergency shutdown in the protocol. It's currently set to 50,000 MKR. There are a couple of things that it's potentially useful for. I guess I can maybe go through them briefly. Like it's useful if in the event of a governance attack, as kind of a last resort for maker holders to shut down the protocol grounded gracefully. It's a kind of useful like minority threat to enable or to encourage governance to kind of come to consensus on things rather than leaving a significant portion of MKR holders unhappy. And it's also in the past been a way to sort of like a backup in case there's any critical bug that we weren't able to fix safely. So maybe I guess maybe protocol engineering / smart contracts want to kind of discuss this a little bit, especially around liquidations 2.0, I guess.
Yeah, I'll take that as a invitation. So tomorrow we are planning on also releasing a forum post that discusses the ESM. So we have to update the ESM as part of the liquidations 2.0 update. And that's because in order for the end to function properly, it needs to be able to yank existing auctions. So we basically are going to update the ESM, and since there's no administrative functions on the ESM, this seems like a decent time to, I don't know, like update the amount of MKR in the threshold if we're going to do it. We certainly could do it at a different time, but you know, since we're already in there or going to be in there making these changes, maybe we do it tomorrow. So I don't know. I think that's the general point of the discussion. So does anybody want to weigh in on that?
So maybe I'll just clarify something before that. When you say it has no administrative functions, you mean that in order to change the MKR value, we would need to redeploy and replace the contract?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sorry. The module itself is extremely pure in that there's like, you know, basically no sort of governance ability for us to change anything in it. Obviously, because it is partly intended to be used in case of a governance attack. So so we have to sort of pre-deploy it with the values that we want. And yeah, so if we're going to do that, we have to update it anyway as a result of the liquidations 2.0 update. We should probably just update it if governance has decided they want to change the MKR value as well. So
I think this is something that came out of the mandated actors calls and maybe a little bit of risk as well. But because of the timing, the spell being like tomorrow, there's not the chance for it to go through a full governance cycle. I don't think any of us really have any opposition to raising the maker threshold. It's very expensive, but the amount of assets under management are also quite a bit higher than when we deployed the system as well. So I guess we're bringing it up here to see if anyone has any strong objections to raising the that threshold, in which case it would have to go through a full governance cycle.
Yeah, and maybe just to add a little bit of color on how to think about this threshold, because this is one of the more complex and kind of hotly debated areas of maker protocol governance game theory. You obviously don't want the threshold set too low because then it's too cheap for somebody who, for whatever reason, doesn't like the system or they've got a big MKR short on or whatever to come in and cause a whole bunch of chaos and shut the thing down. On the other hand, if you set it too high, you might have trouble rallying that amount of MKR in an emergency scenario where it actually does need to be used. Remember, one of the purposes is sort of so like an honest minority can shut down the protocol to protect it from some sort of governance attack. So, it doesn't make sense, for example, to set it to, an amount of MKR that's more than half of the circulating supply. the module is pointless then. So you can set it too high as well, and then there's no benefit from it. I will now give a personal opinion, which is that, you know, you would kind of expect that as the MKR price goes up, it's a little bit weird to raise the threshold as the price is going up. Usually you'd think that would go in the opposite direction, because, you know, at least one way to go about trying to set it is to target like a certain dollar value amount for security. But there are other considerations as well, like looking at the MKR distribution and saying like, okay, how many large individuals, you know, would it take theoretically, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's a sort of thing that requires pretty careful game theoretic consideration, and that's why it tends to be hotly debated.
Yeah, so if I can speak, Money Supply from our side actually made a recommendation on this threshold to be raised to 75,000 MKR. I personally think it's a good value, especially because we're seeing that amount of MKR that can be bought on DEXs or borrowed is about 50,000 right now. And there are, of course, downsides to increasing it too high. As Kurt said, most related to how quickly, you know, we can trigger emergency shutdown. But I believe that we just recently showed that with a bit of campaigning, we can get few MKR values activated pretty fast. So I think 75K MKR threshold is good. I even think 100K could work, but not necessarily if you need to react, for instance, in about an hour or so. And at the end, it's mostly related to knowing who the biggest MKR holders are, how quickly, you know, they can react, or we can reach out to them. And I think Money Supply also suggested to prepare some kind of continuity plan to give us better idea of this appropriate amount. So maybe Money Supply, if you're here, if you want to chime in on this topic.
Yeah, my post was fairly long-winded, but yeah, I think basically the idea is we need to find the correct balance, sort of based on evidence of like how high do we need it to be for safety. I think the most obvious, threshold for that is basically like how much maker you can short, because if emergency shutdown happens out of the blue, like the token might be worth hardly anything immediately afterwards. So yeah, I think basically, you know, finding the balance between making sure that it's more than you can just borrow on Aave or other places like that, but low enough that we can actually reach the threshold. And yeah, I think part of figuring out like, you know, what's too high is we should, you know, have some sort of testing regime for some of these emergency situations, and like, you know, people who have significant holdings who want to be, you know, participating in that, you know, yeah, we should basically be a little more professional with like emergency shutdown, like testing. So that's something I'll be working on in the next couple weeks.
I should point out of the technical aspect that for those that aren't familiar, the ESM does irrevocably burn the MKR that's depositing to it. So even if someone does borrow the MKR, they're committing to essentially burn this MKR forever. Now, in the case of a shutdown, if we were to redeploy the system and the burner was, or multiple burners were honest participants, we would be able to mint ideally back to those people in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's kind of worth noting regarding the shorting thing as well, the potential short attack, right? Anybody who is doing that attack would also need enough MKR to sell before triggering shutdown. So they need to both have enough to lock in the contract and also to sell to make a profit. So I don't know how much that would be, depends how far the token drops, right? But they would need like in excess of the ESM amount, probably by like 10 or 20% or something at least.
There's I mean, you need to have enough maker tokens to trigger the ESM, but there's a lot of like, you could short pretty much anything in DeFi based on DAI blowing up and come out ahead. So I think, yeah, basically you just need enough MKR to trigger it, but there's innumerable ways to profit from maker blowing up.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's more the point that you just need the capital to trigger the shutdown and also to spend on the shorts, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I mean, I think absent sort of heavy opposition from anyone, we're just going to, I think, include that increase to 75,000 in the liquidations 2.0 update. As Brian said, it is going to skip the kind of more regular governance cycle we'd want, but it's just yeah, it saves everyone a little bit of time, and we did kind of have the off-chain governance poll that seemed to support an increase, and we also had the kind of report that Money produced, right, that sort of suggested that 75k would be a good amount.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty strong argument that you should at least aim to be higher than sort of what someone could borrow on the market. And what with MKR supply still basically up around 1 million, being at 7.5% of total supply seems like a pretty reasonable threshold. It's clearly not too high yet from a certain perspective.
Yeah, I think I agree. Like, I don't see a problem with it being 75. I think we could rally that amount of MKR if we needed to in an emergency.
Yeah, I mean, we just did, really, so.
I don't know, along the lines of what Monet Supply was talking about, we might want to think about having some sort of voluntary opt-in, like pager system for big MKR holders who want to be, potentially on call, because yeah, the hardest part of getting an ESM triggered in time, which hopefully you have the governance delay of 2 days for most cases, but for some extreme cases you might only have an hour if it's an Oracle attack thing, in which case it might be better to use the Oracle freeze module, but you still need to rally MKR holders in that case enough to overtake the hat, which could be even more, and so the DAO might want to think about having some organized system to sort of send out an emergency alarm and get sufficient MKR liquidity online and ready to act in a short time frame.
Yeah, and that is something that may be in scope for new core unit proposals that may still come out of the foundation dissolving.
Yes, so specifically, this is something we're going to start looking at GovAlpha as well, like trying to put together sort of emergency contact details for some of the larger MKR holders. Because, as you said, I think that's going to be important going forward.
Ideally, you'd have some sort of broadcast system that people could subscribe to, so that privacy could be respected. But something like that.
Yeah, I think that would kind of be the ideal. It would just be then a matter of kind of contacting large MKR holders and kind of getting them to sign up, right?
So one of the challenges there may be that this is not the only situation that you want to set up an alarm for. There are actually quite a few, for example, with liquidation events that are happening on chain to do with other signals that indicate suspicious behavior that might need different responses from different people. And so looking a little bit further ahead, it might be good to to bundle that and to have a service that allows different profiles of responders to subscribe to different alarms. So one that I think, for example, will come up soon is our minor extractable value alarms, where you can, for example, compare the distribution of blocks that are being mined by different miners and then compare it to the distribution of MKR or maker transactions that are being mined. So these are just all examples of different alarms that may require different responses. And it would be really nice to have a service where you can see these different scenarios and subscribe to the ones where you would be able to help.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic idea. All right, that maybe covers the ESM discussion. So we're on the hour now, so we can probably spend maybe 15 minutes discussing other things if anyone has anything they want to talk about. Many of you have been excited by the recent market activity.
Deadpan.
It does sort of help with the governance security stuff, so that's nice.
Yep, like it's weird. Like when I say going up, like okay, going up, it's either like, oh yeah, it's more secure, or it's like, oh no, someone's planning a governance attack. So it's something of a mixed feeling for me, but it's good.
So glad you said it. I didn't want to be the Debbie Downer, but yeah. Whenever it happens, I feel like where's Lix? Lix got to tell us what's going on.
Yeah, it's whenever it spikes, it's kind of scary.
New player has entered the chat.
I guess I had a question about the liquidations 2.0 model. Looking into like a lot of kind of newer auction-based methods for doing token sales, or kind of trying to avoid the MEV problem, look like a lot of them are like pretty similar to the liquidations 2.0 perimeters. I was curious like how simple it would be if, like, say we did decided we wanted to mint and sell MKR, or do it kind of like an open market operation. Like, could we use the liquidations 2.0 framework to achieve the fundraise? Like in this case, like we take DAI, right, for collateral, but like say we were trying to get MKR, like couldn't we just as easy reverse the tokens?
Yeah, there are a lot of patterns out there for the Dutch auction style capital raising. We would probably not be able to use liquidation 2.0 directly just because it's so tied to existing vaults. But yeah, there's plenty of precedent to work on for Dutch auctions if you wanted to do a capital raise.
Yep. Pros, are you saying for like collateral liquidations, or are you saying for let's say surplus and debt auctions?
Well, actually, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it for that, but I was thinking specifically like because we were having kind of like the minting versus not minting argument, for instance, like having a way to actually buy it in an open market would be pretty important if you're trying to avoid minting.
Yeah, there is a sort of further off plan to shift, like, let's say at least like flap auctions over to the similar like Dutch auction mechanism. And I suppose we could do the same with flop auctions, it's interesting, flop auctions already kind of start out a little bit high, right? So we pick a different starting price for the flop auctions, which is actually wildly low at this point. Maybe a parameter that we should consider updating. The only downside with that is that both of those auction types, if I recall correctly, kick off from the vow, which is a pretty hardcore contract to change in our system. So we're much better off doing just the sort of collateral liquidation, seeing how this stuff performs. And then there is a sort of, let's call it like a year time horizon plan where we hope to replace the vow, get a few features like having ilk specific SYN queues, which are like, the delays between flop auctions and whatnot, as well as possibly add the Dutch auctions into, flap or flop auctions, or the surplus and debt auctions.
That's awesome. I had no idea. Cool.
The whole team just needs to do something not auction related for like a few months at least.
Wonder why.
Crop join?
DSS Gov.
Putting it out there. I mean, we got the audit now, so.
Yeah, that was in my update. We're looking at crop join right now.
Yeah, and I guess the alpha is that there were no major issues found in the audit, just like a couple of rounding errors, and everything else is a little more just kind of cleanup.
Yeah, we do have a few of these little things that shouldn't take very long to get out the door. The box, the keg, the flash mint, things like that we've kind of pushed off for Liquidations 2.0. We're still going to be working on Liquidations 2.0 for the next couple of months, just getting these piecemeal out the door every week. So expect that. The spells involved in that are quite large, so we're not going to be able to do them all at once unless we can figure out a pattern for multi-part spells. But we might be rolling these out 2 or 3 at a time until we get up to speed.
Regarding crop join, right now, are we still just looking for the sushi implementation, or does the audit also, would it work for compound, for instance?
So the compound piece is more complex than the sushi one because it relies on recursive leverage type stuff. It's a bit more complex. So the sushi join we wanted to go with first because it uses the crop join, the base contract, but the sushi rewards is basically just a Uniswap rewards contract. Those are pretty simple from a smart contracts perspective. You just put things in and then take them out whenever you want, and some amount of rewards just trickle in. So we wanted to go with that one first, but yeah, this could pave the way for doing the compound one as well. But that one is more involved with the audit process.
Yeah, more importantly, right? Like it's an extensible base class, so it should be easy for us to take advantage of like other types of crops, so to speak. Right? You just have to write the code on top of it.
Yeah, we found a pretty good product market fit, I think, with these Uniswap LP tokens, but with V3 coming, there's maybe some concern that we might those might be deprecating and losing liquidity. So going with sushi LP tokens, it doesn't appear that they plan to upgrade. So that should give us plenty of liquidity for some time, I think.
Yeah, even just the other ones like Balancer and Bancor. I mean, I don't think they're all gonna try to just compete with Uniswap by just copying Uniswap. I think they're all gonna try to kind of go in different directions and carve out a different niche. So Well, yeah, I think the Uniswap stuff kind of we kind of got screwed with how V3 works. I'm still pretty optimistic overall about how LP tokens are going to play out long term.
And I mean, that's not to say that UniV3 won't work for us. We just need the community or the Uniswap team themselves to kind of standardize a tokenized version of their new model, and it's completely feasible and possible. But we would prefer to probably use an official wrapper, unless the greater Ethereum community decides to rally around another implementation. But we kind of have to wait and see with that.
Yeah, it's not just about like the technical part about tokenizing a position. It's also about that liquidity is going to be very actively managed in V3, right? So you could imagine, like, if you're just trying to be a market maker around the fair market value, you know, plus minus 2-3% or something, and then someone submits like a huge order, right, that would like basically absorb all of the liquidity in your position, and you would be completely in one token. I could see a lot of LPs just like removing their liquidity, right, or just, you know, going to like an infinite bound liquidity for a second, right, almost like a sandwich, and then as soon as that big trade is over, right, going back to just market making right around the fair market value to profit from the volatility rather than from the whale traders. So given that even if you can tokenize a particular LP kind of range, the question is, how much will people want to uniformly be in that range, right? If it's too small, you're not going to get enough uniformity, and if it's too large, you don't have enough capital efficiency, and it's there's definitely a trade-off to be made. Like, I think the fact that we can give people leverage and increase those yields mean that they can actually have a wider range than they otherwise would if they were actively managing without leverage.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of think that probably as the market figures it out, it'll bifurcate a little into there'll be people who run the super active thing, but then there will probably be a few passive strategies that sort of are found to work fairly well in practice that people pile into, because then they can, you know, leverage the tokens like you just said. It's just going to take the market a while to, you know, figure out what works, because I don't think you can predict it in advance easily.
Yeah, we just need to see the launch and see how it kind of plays out.
You know, or it's possible that all the passive seekers go to Sushi and Balancer or something like that. That's not an impossible outcome either. In which case, you know, Sushi and Balancer LPs.
I mean, they may just stay on Uniswap V2 as well, like, especially if we're already offering leverage, because like leverage outside is a way to increase the passive income, right?
Yeah, that could happen too, because they can't shut V2 down. It's going to be there forever. So.
All right, we're approaching 1:15, and we've had some longer meetings of late. So, has anyone has anything else they want to bring up before we end? I think we'll consider leaving it there. Does anyone have any final points or anything? Seems like no. One final point I would like to make, or just make people aware of, is I'm planning to take some time off from Monday to Wednesday next week. I'll be back for the governance call. But if anyone has any governance queries in the meantime, please reach out to Peyton, our pros. All right. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. I'll talk to you all next week. Cheers, guys.
Thanks.